I always believed respect was the foundation of love. You can argue, you can disagree, but if respect is there, you still feel safe. The night I met my boyfriend's parents, I learned what it feels like when that foundation is shattered and how betrayal doesn't always come from strangers, but from the person sitting right beside you. My name is Marisol. I am 32, and for 3 years I thought I had built something real with the man I loved. He wasn't perfect, but he was kind in the beginning, and after years of empty relationships that felt like gold, he worked hard, I worked hard, and we made space for each other in a world that never slowed down. Or at least I thought we did. Everything started to shift after his younger sister got married. Suddenly, his family's expectations became the third voice in our relationship. He started talking more about tradition, about how his parents wanted things done a certain way. I brushed it off at first. Families have opinions, right? But the truth is, when you love someone, you pay attention to what they let into your shared life. And my boyfriend started letting in doubts, demands, and judgments that weren't mine. When he told me his parents wanted to meet me over dinner, I felt nervous but hopeful. Meeting the family is supposed to be a sign of seriousness. I bought a nice bottle of wine, dressed carefully, even practiced polite things to say. I wanted them to see me the way I once believed he saw me, as someone worth standing beside. The night began warmly enough. His parents greeted me with smiles. His father shook my hand firmly. His mother ushered me into a cozy dining room that smelled of roasted chicken and fresh herbs. For a moment, I felt like maybe this would go well. Maybe I was about to become part of a family that would embrace me. But as the courses were served, the conversation shifted. His parents spoke in Spanish, laughing together while I sat quietly. What they didn't know, what my boyfriend didn't know, was that I understood every word. My father taught me the language as a child, and though I wasn't fluent, I could follow the rhythm, the meaning, the sharp edge of their laughter. His mother's first remark was about my job, an entry-level position she dismissed as not enough to support anyone. His father added that, among all the men their daughter had dated, mine looked the least ambitious. And then came the knife. My boyfriend joined in. He told them I was someone he was just managing, someone he wanted them to meet, before he eventually found someone better. I sat there, my face calm, my heart pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. My hands tightened in my lap until my nails left crescents in my skin. His mother looked directly at me at one point and asked in Spanish if they were sure I didn't understand. My boyfriend laughed and said I was too stupid to know what they were talking about. And then, as if nothing had happened, she turned to me in English and asked sweetly, "Are you enjoying the food, dear?" I smiled. I said yes. And in that moment I made a choice. I wasn't going to defend myself at that table. I wasn't going to beg for respect from people who had already decided I wasn't worthy of it. Instead, I was going to let them believe I was deaf, oblivious, and small. Because when revenge comes, it doesn't announce itself, it arrives quietly like a storm rolling in beneath a still sky. By dessert, my decision was made. I waited until the plates were cleared, then looked at his parents and thanked them in Spanish. Slowly, clearly, with every ounce of dignity they thought I didn't have. The silence that fell over the table was thick, choking. His father froze mid-sip. His mother's fork clattered to her plate. And my boyfriend, my partner of 3 years, went pale as if the blood had been drained from him. I told them, still in Spanish, that I understood everything. Every insult, every cruel laugh, every word that stripped me bare while I sat quietly in front of them. And then I stood, picked up my coat, and walked out into the night. That was the end of the dinner, but it wasn't the end of the story, because betrayal like that doesn't fade when you close the door behind you. It lingers, festers, demands to be answered. And I knew deep in my soul that I wasn't going to let that night define me as a victim. I was going to make sure it became the turning point of my life. The next morning, my phone buzzed with messages that blurred together calls. I didn't answer texts I didn't read. My boyfriend begged me to talk, claimed it was all a misunderstanding, that I took things the wrong way. But the memory of his laughter at my expense was carved too deep to ignore. You can't mistake cruelty for anything else. When he finally cornered me outside my apartment, his face was pale, his words tumbling out like loose change. "You don't understand," he said. "I had to act that way for them. They're traditional, they wouldn't respect me if I looked weak." Weak. That's what he thought standing up for me would make him. I stared at him, feeling the last strands of whatever love I had left snap one by one. Do you hear yourself? I asked. You let your parents rip me apart, and instead of defending me, you joined in. That's not strength, that's cowardice. He tried to backtrack to claim it was a joke, that he didn't mean it. But the thing about betrayal is once you've heard the truth, you can't unhear it. His words were honest in that dining room, surrounded by the people whose approval he craved most. What he said then was who he really was. What he said now was just damage control. I closed the door on him that day, but I couldn't close the door on the ache inside me. For weeks, I replayed that dinner like a bad film stuck on loop, the smirks, the laughter, his voice dripping with arrogance as he tore me down in front of the very people he wanted me to impress. It wasn't just disrespect, it was erasure. He made me invisible so he could shine brighter. But here's the thing about invisibility, it makes you sharper, hungrier. I started to see things I had ignored before. The way he often dismissed my ideas, laughing at them like they were silly. The way he only introduced me to friends when it benefited him. The way he spoke about our future in vague terms like I was a placeholder rather than a partner. That dinner didn't break us, it revealed what had always been there. And then came the whispers. A friend of a friend reached out to me one night with screenshots conversations between him and another woman. Flirtations, late-night promises, words eerily similar to the ones he once used on me. My chest tightened as I scrolled, but strangely I didn't cry. It wasn't shock, it was confirmation. The dinner hadn't been a one-time betrayal, it was just the mask slipping. So I gathered my strength. Revenge wasn't going to be a screaming match or a public scene, it was going to be truth, me reclaiming my dignity by showing everyone exactly who he was. I compiled everything, the screenshots, the texts, the details of that dinner he swore wasn't that bad. I didn't blast it online. That would have made me look petty. No, I chose precision. I sent it quietly to the people who mattered most to him, his family, his closest friends, even his boss who happened to value honesty above all else. I didn't embellish, I didn't dramatize, I simply let his own words condemn him. The fallout was immediate. His parents, who once sneered at me, now looked at their son with shame. His friends distanced themselves, the group chats went silent. At work, opportunities slipped through his fingers as whispers of untrustworthy followed him down hallways. And for once, I didn't feel erased. I felt seen. But revenge wasn't the ending. It was the beginning of something else. Because while his world cracked, I started piecing mine together again. I enrolled in a course I had been too afraid to take before threw myself into work with a fire I hadn't felt in years. I reconnected with people who valued me for who I was, not who I dated. Slowly, I began to rebuild not as someone's girlfriend but as myself. And yet deep down, I knew this story wasn't finished. Betrayal doesn't just vanish when you expose it. It lingers like a shadow waiting for the next truth to be uncovered. And I was about to learn that his betrayal at dinner wasn't the only secret festering beneath the surface. It was weeks later, when the dust from the first storm had barely settled, that I stumbled across the truth that changed everything. A mutual friend invited me for coffee, her hands twisting nervously around her cup, as if she wasn't sure whether to speak. Finally, she leaned closer and whispered, "There's something you should know about his family, about why they treated you that way." My stomach nodded, but I listened. She told me that his family had a long history of controlling who their children dated. His sister's marriage wasn't a love story, it was an arrangement approved only because her husband came from a wealthy family with the right reputation. My boyfriend had been under pressure for years to follow the same path. When he brought me into that dining room, it wasn't to honor me, it was to test me, to parade me like merchandise before an audience that had already decided I wasn't good enough. And when he laughed at their insults, it wasn't just cruelty, it was strategy. He wanted their approval more than he wanted my respect. The betrayal cut even deeper than before. It wasn't just that he failed to defend me, it was that he offered me up as a sacrifice to secure his place in their world. I had been nothing more than a pawn in a game of tradition and power I never agreed to play. Rage burned through me, but so did resolve. If they thought I was powerless, If they thought I was just a placeholder until he found someone worthy, they were about to learn just how wrong they were. I started with his parents. I knew where they moved in society, the charity circles they bragged about, the reputation they guarded like treasure. With the evidence, I had the screenshots of their son's infidelity, the stories of how they had belittled me, even recordings from women who had faced the same ridicule at their hands. I sent carefully crafted messages to the very people they wanted to impress: donors, colleagues, fellow churchgoers. I didn't need to scream. I just let the truth ripple outward, unstoppable. Their pristine image cracked almost overnight. Invitations they once took for granted stopped arriving. Whispers followed them at events. Suddenly, the people who had mocked me at their dining table were the ones being quietly mocked themselves. Karma had a way of finding its path, and I had simply cleared the road. As for him, the man I once thought I loved, his downfall was slower, but more painful. Friends who had once laughed at his jokes now avoided his calls. His boss, already skeptical after the stories I had revealed, began cutting him out of projects. And when word spread that he had cheated on me, that he had torn down the woman who once stood by him, even the women he pursued turned their backs. The charm he once wielded like a weapon had dulled, leaving him exposed as the hollow man he really was. Meanwhile, I felt myself transforming. For the first time in years, I wasn't shrinking to fit someone else's expectations. I was expanding. I took risks I'd been too afraid to take, applied for a promotion I thought was out of reach, and got it. I surrounded myself with people who respected me, who valued honesty over appearances. And little by little, the ache of betrayal turned into the steel of resilience. But the story didn't end with their downfall. Because one evening, as the sun dipped low and painted the sky in colors too beautiful for the pain I carried, I got a message from his sister. She wanted to meet. Curiosity gnawed at me, and against my better judgment, I agreed. We sat in a quiet cafe, two women bound by bloodlines and choices we never asked for. Her eyes were tired, her smile forced. And then she told me a secret I never expected: that she envied me. Envied me for walking away, for refusing to bend, for tearing down the very system that kept her trapped in a marriage she didn't want. Her words shook me. For years I thought I was the weak one, the outsider, the woman not good enough. But in her eyes I saw something else. I was the one who had broken free. Her confession haunted me for days after that meeting. I replayed her words again and again: I envy you for walking away. It was the kind of admission that stripped away the glossy facade of her perfect marriage, the kind their parents had paraded as a symbol of tradition and pride. Behind her designer clothes and glittering rings was a woman imprisoned by expectations, suffocating under the weight of duty. For the first time, I realized my story wasn't just mine. It was part of something larger, something deeper. This wasn't only about my boyfriend's betrayal or his parents' cruelty. It was about generations of silence, women being forced to swallow their pain so the men in their lives could look powerful. His sister was proof of what would have happened to me if I had stayed a life polished on the outside, hollow on the inside. The clarity was both freeing and devastating. Freeing because I had escaped, devastating because I saw how many women hadn't. My ex didn't take long to show up again, though. One evening, he appeared outside my apartment, his face gaunt, his confidence gone. He begged me to forgive him, said his parents were furious with him, that his world was crumbling, and he needed me. For a flicker of a second, I saw the man I once fell for: the nervous boyishness, the way his eyes searched mine like they held all the answers. But then I remembered that dinner table, the cruel laughter, his smirk, as he let me be humiliated. I needed you too, I told him, my voice steady, and you chose them. He cried right there in the hallway, but I didn't let him in, because forgiveness without change is just permission to hurt me again. And karma was already doing its work. His job became unbearable. With the truth out, he was no longer the golden boy. He was a liability. Promotions slipped through his fingers, friends cut ties, women whispered behind his back. His parents, desperate to repair their own image, distanced themselves from him too. The very approval he had sacrificed me for was gone, ripped from his hands like sand slipping through his fingers. Meanwhile, I was blooming. My career soared, my friendships deepened, and my confidence returned. I was no longer the woman sitting quietly at a table while others mocked me. I was the woman who had turned betrayal into a weapon, silence into a voice, weakness into strength. And yet, I didn't gloat. I didn't dance on the ruins of his life. I didn't need to. Watching him fade into the shadows was enough. My revenge wasn't about destroying him, it was about reclaiming myself. Months later, I bumped into his sister again. She pulled me aside, whispered that she had finally filed for divorce, that she was leaving the marriage her parents had forced her into. She thanked me, said my courage gave her the push she needed. For the first time, I saw genuine hope in her eyes. That was when I truly understood my story wasn't about revenge alone. It was about breaking cycles, about showing that women don't have to stay silent, don't have to accept humiliation just to belong. So here I am telling you this story, not because I want pity, but because I want you to remember this: when someone shows you who they are, believe them. Don't shrink yourself for approval you'll never truly earn. And don't ever let betrayal convince you that you're powerless. Because sometimes the most powerful revenge isn't in what you do to them, it's in who you become without them. If my story touched you, please like, share, and subscribe. And tell me in the comments, would you have stayed quiet at that dinner table or walked away like I did? I'd love to hear your thoughts.